So I want to talk to you today about the influencer principle. Christmas 2023 is winding down, 2024 starting, and it's been rough, as you know. October 7th last year was horrific. Hamas did some horrific things, attacked Israel, and Israel has been relentless responding since then. Just devastation, bombs, cutting off food and water, just horrific things. And we as humanity are trying to respond to this. What do? I had my own thoughts and ideas initially. We were sad, my wife and I and family. We mourned collectively. We were grieving. Honestly, it's not something that I know a ton about. Kind of went into learning mode. I wanted to learn what's going on. Why is this happening? So in the old days, I feel like when I didn't know something, or the generation before us, when they didn't know something, they would go find a book or an article. But these days, it's quite a bit different. We have access to influencers, people that are experts in their field. We can go to them online, through social media, YouTube, and we can get their opinions and their reactions like immediately, sometimes even live. So that's what I did. I kind of searched and sought out some credible sources in the midst of this. And for me, as an American, I feel like I don't have the credibility to speak into this. So I sought out Palestinians. I've been to Israel and Palestine a few times. I've worked with the Palestinian Bible Society before, and so I have a little bit of familiarity. But in looking online, I was noticing that a lot of the American church was not saying anything, was not crying out, was not calling out for a ceasefire, calling out against genocide. And as I searched, I came across this amazing person named Reverend Munther Isaac, and he is the pastor or the priest at the Lutheran church in Bethlehem called the Christmas Church, of all places, the birthplace of Christianity. And as we know from the book of Acts, there's been Arab Christians in that area since the beginning, since Jesus came. So that's a credible source to me. And Reverend Munther Isaac, he had a lot to say. He's written books, he's studied, very educated, and I started learning and absorbing what he was saying. And immediately he's been calling for a ceasefire, calling out this evil, basically saying that there's violence happening. Yes, the attacks on October 7th were horrific, but there's been 75 years of ongoing atrocities and occupation. And we need to call it all out and say it's all horrific, and we need to stand by the innocent and the oppressed Israelis, innocent and oppressed Palestinians. We need to stop this genocide, stop this occupation now. As Christmas approached, we tuned into one of his sermons. He was preaching on Christmas Eve. And he had this very powerful sermon where he was relating the suffering of the Palestinians to the suffering of Christ. And we know that Christ is also known as Emmanuel, God with us. One of the main points of the coming of Christ is that he entered into our suffering and into our sorrows and into our pain. And he became one of us, Emmanuel, God with us.
In our pain, anguish, and lament, we have searched for God and found him under the rubble in Gaza. Jesus himself became the victim of the very same violence of the empire when he was in our land. He was tortured, crucified. He bled out as others watched. He was killed and cried out in pain, "My God, where are you?" In Gaza today, God is under the rubble.
I'll put a link to his sermon below this video so you can check that out. It's very powerful. But as he's explaining this and coming up and leading up to Christmas, he and his church came up with this idea where they would put together a nativity scene, which is a traditional thing to do for Christians. You put baby Jesus, Mary, Joseph, the wise men, the shepherds. And it's usually, very beautiful and there's light and there's hope, and it's like, yes, the coming of the Messiah. But the way that he did it, and his church did it, he called it Jesus in the rubble. There was baby Jesus wrapped in a keffiyeh, laying in the manger. The keffiyeh is a cultural symbol for the Palestinian people. And around Jesus is just rubble, just concrete and rebar and just destruction all around the baby Jesus. And he called it Jesus in the rubble. And this, so as I'm noticing this influencer, and then it became pictures and memes and videos, and news agencies from all over the world were coming to Bethlehem to kind of see what's happening this Christmas. And then Reverend Munther and the Christians in that area, they said, let's cancel Christmas. I mean, you can't cancel Christmas, it'll still happen, but let's cancel the celebrations. Let's not participate in that, because in the midst of this horrific ongoing violence, we can't celebrate. We can't enjoy the delicacies and the foods, and we can't welcome people into our churches from all over the world during this time. So let's just cancel it. Wow, my wife and I were moved by that. We put together our own nativity scene on our mantle, and we made it Jesus in the rubble. We decorated our tree, but kind of in a subdued way. We put symbols of one of the churches in Gaza that was bombed by the Israelis, St. Porphyrios church. And we put their symbol on these ornaments, and we put Bible verses on the back of them just to remind ourselves, so we could meditate and pray this Christmas season for the oppressed. So why am I saying all this? How does this apply to you working in the nonprofit media or communications sector? There are influencers out there already, and profitable companies that are trying to make more bucks. They will take their product, they'll go to an influencer, and they'll say, hey, would you promote my product and we'll pay you so much money? Happens all the time. It's very normal. Nothing wrong with that. In the nonprofit world, maybe you don't have a budget for that. You can't find an influencer that is believing in your mission or your cause. And maybe you don't have the money to pay someone anyway. So find an influencer, like someone like Reverend Munther, who is speaking to your cause. That may not be your cause, but that's already speaking into your cause, that has good messaging and good things to say. And then you can take that influencer's posts and content, share them. It's going to benefit them, but it's a win-win. It also benefits you. You can also add your own comment, your own question, share it with your nonprofit followers or contributors. So another thing you can do is position yourself to become an influencer. Become knowledgeable of your nonprofit, your mission, your cause, the thing that you're passionate about. Study it, read about it, and be ready with your area of expertise that someday life, or yes, unfortunately, the extreme tragedy and brokenness of this world, will place even an unwanted focus on your cause. Nobody wants that. Reverend Munther was thrust into this position based on fundamental elements about him that he did not choose and would never desire to choose. So the positioning is often outside of your control, but be prepared anyway at that time to speak up. Reverend Munther did not go out seeking to be an influencer. I think he's probably one of the most reluctant influencers I've ever seen. He's said numerous times, I didn't choose this. I don't want to be this voice, but all eyes have turned towards him, and he's speaking up. And he's been on many of the big news organizations and speaking out all over. And his memes are going everywhere in his sermons and his sound bites.
If you are not appalled by what is happening in Gaza, if you are not shaken to your core, there is something wrong with your humanity.
So to wrap up this influencer principle, I just want to thank Reverend Munther for being an influencer, for stepping in, for helping me, educating me in this time of crisis. I want to do better at advocating for the oppressed, for calling for a stop to genocide, for a ceasefire. It's been 90 plus days, almost 100 days now, of this relentless bombing. Violence doesn't bring peace. Violence just brings more violence. I just want to have some moments of silence for those that have suffered in Israel and Gaza and Palestine, Lord have mercy.